Susan, up
Yeah,
there on the couch.
what's your dog's name?
Charlie.
Uh,
She's a doodle and she's just really attached. So she'll sit up there, and hopefully she won't clean her whole body and, do her thing. But I'll remove her if she does, as long as I know she can cut and, if I need to stop for any reason. But that's why I'm wearing these instead of I have my mic, but I'm not using it because you'll hear them. You'll hear every movement.
oh, okay.
It
Well,
doesn't
we'll just
have a way to block it, the sound, where my earphones do.
it's okay. We'll just welcome Susan Grau and family members to the Sheol Podcast. So, how's
There we
that?
go. That works for me.
All right. Well, Susan, I'm glad you could do this. Um, it's
Me too.
it's important, I think, to be able to talk about grieving, because when we talk about near-death experiences, which we do a lot, that not everybody has a near-death experience and comes back. Um, and family members frequently listen to shows like this and kind of feel encouraged a lot of times, but also they still have to deal with their grief. So
Mm.
appreciate you being here.
I'm glad to be here.
Before we start talking about what you do, can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay. I'm Susan Grau, and I am a grief and addiction therapist, and I am a medium. I am an author of Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons with Hay House, and I work in the field of grief.
All right. And I know that, so you've been featured in The Hollywood Reporter, you've been featured in Elle. Um, what do you think about your story and your work resonates so well with people?
Well, I don't think a lot of mediums have the background I have. Number one, just my own emotional roller coaster of having three people in my family commit suicide. So I don't think, when people die by suicide, it's a different kind of death. And I think that has put me in a different category as far as my studies go. I also work with children who have near-death experiences. I have my doctorate in divinity and I work with them. And so that helps. But I think most importantly is just that I don't think I'm in a different category than anyone else. I truly don't. I just think that I'm true to what I do and I have a lot of ethics and morals and so I'm very careful about what I do. And I think when you understand grief, it changes how you present. I think it does. And I think it's imperative that if you're going to do this work, especially mediumship, that you fully understand the grieving process, not just personally, but more importantly, you understand how to help others.
And you've had a near-death experience, correct?
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I was 4.5 years old, and I was locked in an unplugged freezer in a garage. And I was, I don't know if you want the whole story, it's long, but I can briefly kind of go through it if you'd like.
Yeah, please. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I was playing fort with some boys. They told me if I got up in the freezer and got them popsicles, and that they would let me continue playing. And of course, I wanted to. I was little, and they were older, and so I climbed up in that freezer, and it wasn't plugged in. And when I went to tell them I was getting ready to turn around, they sealed the freezer door, and then they closed the garage door, and they ran home. And I'm certain that they didn't know that the ultimate result would be me dying, but that was the ultimate result. And I just remember, screaming at the top of my lungs, like really terrified. And it was, the sound of terror is like a high pitched sound of a cat, the highest pitched sound you can think of. And so my mother heard it and she thought it was the kittens on our land, in heat or whatever, that was. And so she kind of bypassed it. And, I just kept screaming and screaming, and I innately knew I was going to die. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it was really, really serious, and I was in big trouble, and I was definitely in a terror mode. I felt like I was in a cage, and I felt like an animal in a cage. I was flinging myself and screaming, and as much as I could fling, I couldn't even turn around. I was kind of shoved in. Um, And then I saw three lights, and I call them my angels. I believe the angels crossed me over and brought me back. And it's not a religious connotation, although I understood angels, but I believe that they come as we understand them, especially children. With children, as I work with them, I see that, they see things as they understand things because we're little and we don't understand like an adult does. So we have to process differently. And the next thing I knew, they told me to stop screaming and I didn't. And then I heard one of them really be, firm about it, loving, but firm. And I knew she was powerful. And she said, stop screaming. And we're going to get your mommy. And I kind of got the feeling like, but first, and the next thing I knew, I was at the bottom of some stairs and I was looking up and I was thinking, how am I going to get to the top of those stairs? Because I know there's something in the center of that building. And what it was looking back. And I'm going to tell you as an adult, my story, because you wouldn't understand it as a child the way I saw it. So I want to be clear about that. I didn't understand most of this. But it was a Greco-Roman room. It had pillars that were broken and the ceiling was open. And I knew that there was a circle in the center of this and I just wanted to be there, but I didn't know how I was going to get up the stairs. I felt kind of like jello-y, but I was me. And the next thing I knew, I was on the edge of that well and I was looking down. I called it the well, and I actually studied for my doctorate under Dr. Raymond Moody. And I told him about the well and I said, how come I didn't see the tunnel? And he said, maybe the truth is that well was your tunnel. And I went, what? I was blown away by that. What are you talking about? But it made sense. And it's mind blowing for me. But anyway, I looked inside. This movement was going on inside this well, and it was looking back like DNA, and it was twisting and turning. And I somehow knew it was one consciousness, yet it was separate in that I was hearing people's prayers. I understood what prayers were. So I knew that. I knew what was going on. And I was hearing things like, my mom's going to die. She has cancer. God, please help her. And my dad, I remember hearing one of it was a young boy, obviously. I'm turning 16. My dad's going to buy me a car, but he doesn't want to buy me the car I want. And, God, please help him, tell him to buy me that car. And I was hearing all kinds of different things. And some were traumatic and some were just, our needs, whatever it is we want in life. And I looked at the three angels that were on my left. And I said to them, where am I? And they said, you're in the room of heart's desires. And I'm pretty sure they got in my head what to say to them or what to ask them. But I asked, do you answer all those? And they said, no, Susie, sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them. I was kind of blown by that because my mom used to say that, if you don't like it, if you want it, doesn't mean it's good for you. So you're not getting it. And I thought, I don't know if I like it here. But I felt very peaceful and very calm. And it was a beautiful room. I mean, it was amazing. And you feel it's hard to describe in human terms. It truly is, but it's like nothing you've ever imagined. And the next thing I knew, I was looking at this road. I called it the Yellow Brick Road because I'd seen The Wizard of Oz, so I understood that. And I was looking out at this road, and it was a golden pavers. And I saw pyramids, and I saw people going to the bottom of these pavers and pulling from the bottom of this pyramid. And I innately knew, it wasn't something they told me, I just knew that was people's life journey. And they were pulling from the bottom of the pyramid, and they were throwing it off balance. And I knew that, kind of like Jenga, but there wasn't a Jenga at the time, but it felt like what we know that game to be now. And I saw people dropping to their knees and saying, for the love of God, please help me. Nothing's working out. My life is so messed up and I can't seem to get it right. And I can't seem to do it right. And I remember feeling like I wanted to cry because I was sad for them, which was, my MO. I was very empathic. I cried over Bambi and everything else, even as I got older as an adult. And I watched these beautiful beings come in and pull the pavers out and go to the top of the pyramid and put them back. The bottom of the pyramid and put them back. And then they went to the top of the pyramid and I watched them pull these pavers from the top and they would recreate themselves. And then they started paving the path. And I said, and then the humans, whatever, were gone. So this is all metaphorical to teach me something. Keep that in mind. So they're trying to teach us when we're there how to do it differently. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, we are the pavers. You are not. All you have to do is walk it. And I said, what if you walk it wrong? And they said, we bless and block everything. Make no mistake. You can get through the blocks, battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And if there's another wall, shift again. If there's another wall, shift again until you see us paving your path. And they said, which I have never forgotten any detail of this, what you try to control controls you, and what you run from chases you. You think you know what's best for you. And they went to their heart and they said, we know what's best for you. And it was quite profound. It still is for me. And some other things happened in that room. And then I flashed into the room of knowledge, with people call that the Akashic records. I don't really relate to that word. It's not that it's not real. It's a room of knowledge to me. And I saw it was kind of like virtual, but there was no such thing when I was young. I'm 65, so there's no such thing as virtual, to be honest with you. And I remember feeling like, what's going on here? Because I could see, like, I don't know if it's, I always call it like plates or something, but they were books. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but they were both. And I saw them coming towards people, and I watched groups of people, like I'm assuming soul families, because that's what I know it to be today. And they were making their plans. And they were saying things like, well, I'm going to do marriage, and I'm going to learn this, and I'm going to learn that, and I'm going to go through this, and like the PhD in hardships I was hearing. And I heard these guides say to them, or angels, or both, say to them, oh no, that's too much for one life journey. And, it's going to be too overwhelming. We want to make sure you get through it. And they're having conversations. And they were like, no, I can do it. I'm going to learn so much. I can do it. I'm thinking that was me. Now that I look back, I can do it. Excuse me. I have a little hair on my, and I was thinking, what's going on here? And the angels looked at them, or the guides, and said, you have free will. You can make this decision. We discourage it, but you can do it. And they said, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then they were gone. And it was like they popped away. That's what it felt like to me, like poof, they were gone. And I saw more people or spirits. And I didn't really know if they were people or spirits. To me, they were people. And then it would start again. And I asked these angels that were with me, where did they go? What happened to them? And I didn't know if they were in trouble or what happened to them. And they said they went to their next incarnation. Had no idea what they meant. And it's really interesting because when I came back later on in life, somebody said, do you believe in reincarnation? And I went, oh my God, that's that word. Because we didn't talk about that stuff when I was young. And so when it was brought up to me years later, oh my God, I heard that word there. I understand. I know what it is. And I could talk about it. And it made sense to me then. And it was kind of that way with most things. It started to really make sense. And then more things happened in there. And then I went to the room of companions, which is our animals and the creatures on the planet. And they were playing, and they were happy and joyful and free and young. Everything was young. Not my age young, but young. I didn't feel any old people or old things, but I didn't know anyone that died really, that I knew closely. I had an aunt that passed. I didn't know her. I had never met her. So not that I needed to, they would have known me. But anyway, and then I was in this, I was going with the animals, and I went into this beautiful past, I'm going to call it just grass area, because I'm not sure what it was. And it had all these, those little things you blow on, make wishes, dandelions? Is that what they're?
I think that's right.
Okay. And I always forget what they're called. I'm always like, what are they called? And daisies. And I was sitting in this field, and I was having creatures come up to me, and I looked to my left, and it's very intimate to me, so I don't share a lot about it, but there was this beautiful being on a mountain, and I wanted to get up that mountain, and I remember just to cut it really briefly because I'll start crying. I saw this energy come towards me of pure love, and I knew I was perfect. I was everything, and I was nothing. It was pretty amazing. And then I knew I was okay in every way. It's safe in every way. And then I looked to my right and I saw a cobblestone cottage. Don't know why. I still don't know why. And I watched this beautiful angel come floating towards me. And all I could think of was, I want to float. I hope I can float. I hope she lets me float. I'm sure I was floating, but I didn't know it. But I wanted to float so bad. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so I felt very peaceful and very happy and very joyful and just very perfect. And when the angels open their mouths, the words and the music come out at the same time. It's like nothing I can describe to you. It's not like a song. It's like the whale song, If I Got Close. And I was hearing that, and then she said, it's time to go. And I ended up by this river of water, and she explained to me that we go through water. And that's how we arrive. And I felt like they were going to put me in the water to get clean, so that when I saw my mommy, I wouldn't be dirty, but I wasn't dirty. But that's what I thought. And she was saying, all is well, and you will go through a difficult journey, and we want you to know that, but it will be okay. And I didn't really understand what that meant. I think I probably would have stayed if I did, because it was rough. It's been rough, with all the suicides and everything. It's been tough. And then the next thing I knew, I was going into this water, and my mom said the whole time she was hearing, your baby's in the freezer, your baby's in the freezer. And I wasn't, I don't think that I was alive. And she said that she finally got it. And I remember seeing my mom from there and kind of almost communicating with her, but she wasn't responding. So my mom had this gift, and they were medicating her. They locked her up for a couple weeks, and she had a nervous breakdown from it. Because, in those days, you didn't see things. That meant you were crazy. And so she was medicated, so she wasn't listening to her intuition, her instincts. And she finally did. And she said she came out, she opened up the garage door, which I don't even know how it got open to begin with, to go play in it. We weren't allowed in it. So those boys were pretty, they knew what was in there. And she opened up the freezer door, and she said she spun me around, and I was ashen. So I didn't have any color to me, and my fingertips were blue and ashen, both. She said it was frightening. And she started screaming. There were no cell phones, and there were no garage door openers. So out she went, trying to get help, and she dropped me, and I hit my jaw and cracked open my chin. Still have my little scar, and took a breath. And while she was running to get help. And when I got better or felt better, I slept for a long time. I just remember sleeping for a long time. And I would get like visions, which I don't usually share, which is kind of interesting, but I would get visions of things while I was sleeping, and I would see things. And when I actually woke up, I could see people and I could hear them, but it was mumbling, and it scared me. I thought they were the boogeyman. And I would cover my head with my blankets and say, go away, go away, go away. Like we do. I didn't want to put my feet down and go get my mommy, because I thought they were under the bed. They were going to grab me, and, things like that. And they never harmed me. And so I got used to that. And it became my abnormally normal journey, just to have spirits go, wake up. I just died, and you're going to hear so-and-so's brother, sister's best friend died. And that's me. And they think I did it on purpose, and I didn't, or whatever the storyline was. And so then I'd hear so-and-so's, brother's best friend, sisters died, or whatever. And I knew the answer. I knew what happened. And they would be like, how does she know that? How does she know that? And then it just kept happening throughout my life. I became a grief and addiction therapist. I'm a grief specialist, addiction therapist. And I started helping people with their grief, because I had enough of my own already by then. I had 2 friends who also died by suicide. And so I knew what suicide was, and the pain of it. It's part of my journey for whatever reason. And that's it. That's pretty much the story.
So you're 4.5 years old at the time this happens, right? Did
Yeah.
you feel at 4.5 years old, you have, I would assume, less inhibitions and things like that. Did you tell your family about this right away, or did it take time to kind of let the story unfold?
Um, Sorry, I just saw something around you and I was trying to figure out what that was. I just actually saw a person. What was your question? I'm so sorry. I just dropped into my, I know it's weird. It
Yeah,
is
no,
weird
no,
to
no,
me
no.
too. I always
It's okay.
question it.
It's
I go,
okay.
what was that? Um, Go ahead, say that. Ask me that again, please.
Oh, I just wanted to know if it was something that you were able to communicate with your mother right away, or if it was something that was hard to kind of put into words at 4.5 years old.
I didn't talk about it really. I talked about it to my sister a little bit. My mom knew. My mom had this gift. My sister had this gift. My brother had this gift. And so they kind of knew what I was trying to say, but I really couldn't verbalize it. No, I just remembered it all. It's kind of like people always ask me, how could you remember all that at 4.5 years old and now you're as old as you are? And I said, have you ever seen The Wizard of Oz? And they go, yeah. And I go, do you remember like the little guys walking on the, the little lollipop kids? And do you remember the light colors? Do you remember the animals that were with her and the creatures and the Tin Man? And they're like, oh, yeah. I go, you remember all the details, don't you? And they go, yeah. And I go, that's how I feel. It's like it's such an impactful. Wizard of Oz was so impactful to children that it's a great example. So I remembered it all. I just didn't know what to talk about. It became my abnormally normal knowing and my abnormally normal life. I didn't try to have that happen, but I know before it happened, I could see animals float when they would pass away because we had animals on our land, not like lambs and stuff, but little creatures. And when they would die, I would see them float. And I didn't know what that was. It was just, I don't even think I thought anything because it was my normal. I never knew any different. So I probably thought everybody did that. That's all I can think of. But so I know I had it prior to this ability. I just I didn't understand it, and I didn't need to because as time went on, they would explain things to me. So there was no need. I just needed to be true to who I was or what I was experiencing. But my mom was obviously very afraid of it. So she'd say, don't talk about it. And then I'd be playing with friends and go, your grandma wants to play house with us. And they go, that's so mean. My grandma died, and they'd punch me or something, little kids. And I would go, no, but she's here. And I'd cry and I'd be so sad. And I'd tell my mom, she goes, I told you not to talk about it. So my mom was afraid.
Was there ever a point for you where, as you're growing up with these kinds of experiences, where you said, I need to integrate this or find answers, or did you meet someone that sort of helped you
Both.
begin to both? Okay. Can you talk about that?
So I was about, I don't know, I can't tell you, I was between 18 and 20. And my Nana died and she came to me. And it blew my mind because I didn't know she had died. And the time that she died was the time I wrote down. And she talked to me like she was in the room with me. And it was the first real love loss that I, like love. And I was pretty blown away by that. And so I called UCLA Medical Center. They were looking into extrasensory perception, ESP. And I told the man, what was happening. And he said, sounds like you're a medium. And I said, what's that? And he said, that's someone who talks to dead people. And I hung up and I was freaking out. I thought, oh my God, I'm crazy. What's going on? And I didn't talk about it after that for a while. But then I decided I needed to understand what was happening. And so I ended up meeting James Van Praagh, and we're actually friends. And I honor him so much because he guided me into understanding how to turn it down, how not to walk around seeing spirits everywhere, how to set boundaries so I could sleep because I was woken up all the time. I had a sleep disorder. And that doesn't mean I always set the boundaries. I kind of like them visiting me and I miss it when they don't. But anyway, and then I started to look into it a little bit, but I did not want to lose my license. I didn't want anyone to tell me I was crazy, or so I didn't do a lot of follow up. I just would be with friends who I knew I could trust, or people I was in Al-Anon at the time, and I would talk to my Al-Anon friends and go, I see things, and they go, what do you see around me? And then I tell them, and they go, that's totally accurate. How could you know that? And I go, I don't know. How did I know that? And I still till this day do that. So when I have clients in my room and I'll tell them something very profound, like your mother's here and she's telling me her name is Audrey and she's telling me how she died and I'm going through this and this is your relationship. This is the last thing you talked about and she wants you to know. And they're going, oh my God, you can't know that. And I'm going, oh my God, I can't know that. So we're both having that response. I'm just keeping it to myself because I'm the professional. But it's overwhelming and still mysterious to me. It will always be mysterious after all these years. But I started studying. I saw Sylvia Brown, I later on in life, Lisa Williams, Tony Stockwell. I mean, I was going to the best and finding out what the heck's going on here. And when I met James, he literally walked up to me and he said, you had a near-death experience. You've got spirits all around you and you're hiding. Time to come out. And he started laughing. He said, come out of the closet, Susan. We know what that means for him. And I thought, I like this guy. He wanted to help me. And so I started to open up a little bit more, but it was only about whenever Facebook came out, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago or something. I can't even remember. I remember my childhood more than I remember what I ate yesterday. It's really interesting. That's the imprint on me. That's where my memory goes. And there's a reason. I want to say that. I want to clarify. There's a reason. It's because if I remembered every reading I had, I think I'd lose my mind because I read loss and grief. So I don't remember. I will forget the next day. When people say, remember so-and-so that came to you and this happened, and I go, they're calling and they need you to tell them something. And I don't remember. So, that's something I need in order to survive it because I hear the worst of the worst. So there are some that imprint on me that I can't forget and they cause me trauma. I have to be honest, I'm in trauma. And even though it's not my trauma, the thought, someone going through those terrible losses traumatizes us if we have any feelings. So, anyway, I studied and I learned. And then when Facebook came out, I wrote to my family, I'm a medium. I'm typing this and I'm terrified. I'm shaking. I talk to dead people. And if you don't want to be my family, if you don't want, because they were all Catholic, you want to be my friend, that's okay. I'll accept that, but I can't lie anymore. And when I pressed that button, I felt two things. I felt such relief that I started sobbing. I also felt immense fear that people were going to tell me I was crazy. My brother became schizophrenic from this. He had it so profoundly. And they diagnosed him as schizophrenic and they gave, medicated him heavily, just like they did my mom. And my mom was not schizophrenic. They didn't diagnose her with that, but they medicated him and it destroyed him. And so I was very afraid that they were going to do that to me. And so when I pressed that button, I thought for sure people were going to tell me I was crazy. And people said to me, we already knew that. How did you not know we knew that you had something different going on here? And I didn't know they knew. I had no clue. So that's it right there in a nutshell.
Is there anything that you do? I know, having spent a lot of my career in emergency medicine, you tend to, you experience traumatic things and you kind of leave them at the door. Is there anything that you do to sort of, I don't know, cleanse your mind or sort of refresh yourself when you're dealing with so many different types of grief?
Sometimes I have to almost wash it off of me, and I physically do that. I don't know if it works, but I believe it does, so therefore it does. What we believe, what we perceive becomes our reality. It's kind of like fear. If we are fear-based, what we fear we feed, what we feed we perceive, and what we perceive becomes our reality. And so, I do the washing thing, but I forget. I actually forget. There's only been a couple really profound ones that I remember fully. When I wrote my book, I actually had to have people send me their letters that are in my book of the memory of their experience because I couldn't remember the details. So I asked my clients, for those of you who had a profound impact by what I shared with you, please share it back. And I put their letters instead of saying, oh, I remember that, because I didn't. I would remember just brief things about it. And so I put their letters in my book for that reason, because it spoke to me and it speaks to others, because it wasn't my voice. But I think that it just came naturally. I think probably a little PTSD, honestly, from what happened to me as a child. I was trafficked as a little girl, and I had a lot happen in my journey. And I think that probably I had a little bit of that PTSD, and rightfully so. And so I was able to almost dissociate me from what my experiences. And then when I decided to go into the dark night of the soul, basically, it wasn't a mistake at the time. I thought it was, because it was pretty intense, and started to heal those things, like really heal them and look at them. And I thought I had healed everything until I wrote the book. The book was not a labor of love. I came into it wanting it to be helpful to other people and be that labor of love for everyone. But it was a labor of pain, because I had to go back. I couldn't spiritually bypass what happened to me. And so I had to feel it, really feel it, in order to write the right way. I remember sending the first copy, round of my book to Hay House, and they loved it. But one of the things that was said to me was, do not spiritually bypass, Susan. And I was like, what's that mean? Because I didn't want to look at it. I knew what it meant, but I was like, what's that mean? And I wanted to get their take. So they wanted to know how deep they wanted me to go. And they said, you need to feel what you're writing. Don't just say, I wasn't able to have children. I was too damaged from what happened to you. Don't just say that. Say what you felt. What did it feel like to know you couldn't have babies because of what happened? What did it do? Were you angry? Were you sad? Were you overwhelmed? Tell us about that. So I had to go back and do that. And that was probably the most excruciatingly painful healing experience. I actually had to talk with one of my friends who does, dark night of the soul work, basically. And I spent a year talking to her as I was writing this book, saying, I'm remembering this and I'm remembering that, and the power of it and the impact it had on me. And I would just be overwhelmed. And she said, my God, Susan, nobody goes through all these things. And I said, I did. There were so many intensive things. So I think people believe that when you have a near-death experience that you come back and life is grand. It wasn't that way for me. In fact, I think that I was filled enough by that experience that I was able to survive, some really traumatizing events on my journey and thrive through them and help others with them, which was the purpose, wasn't it? Everything that we go through, if we utilize it for the greater good, the greater consciousness, we are actually doing the job we're meant to do through our souls. Some people go to victim, some people go to healing. And I innately chose healing because of my experience. I always know there's more, there's better, there's a reason, there's something I can do with it. And so I get a lot of people who die by suicide, or they want to die by suicide, or I have people who have been trafficked. I have people that are in the darkest of grief and are trying to survive. I have people who can't give birth and don't know what to do. And so I have all those people come to my office. There's a reason for my experiences. I have murder in my family. My uncle was murdered, and it was a horrific event. And he was a World War II vet, and I loved him. I wanted to marry him when I grew up. And he was murdered by his stepson. And it was horrific. And, I found out because it was all over the news in Colorado, because he was a prominent man. And I freaked out, and then of course I got the call from family, but it was in the news before I even heard about it. And, so, but I have people who are murdered, and I know the journey. I know the journey of healing and of facing what we have to step into. As they said, what you run from chases you. What you try to control controls you. So if you think about that, when you're trying to control something, you're thinking about it 24/7. You want control. And so it's controlling you. And so I understand what they're saying about that. That includes grief. Grief you cannot control. You have to step into it. And, there's this beautiful monk called Pema Chodron. I don't know if you know who she is. And she wrote the book When Things Fall Apart. She talks about stepping into the grief because that's the only place you can go with it. If you go any other direction, it will have control. It will not let up on you. So you have to move into it. And that's really frightening for a human mind. It's terrorizing, because you when you step into that, you're going to feel like you want to leave. You're going to feel like you can't survive. You're going to feel like your whole world's crumbling. And in every experience I've had, so I had my oldest brother die by suicide. And then my next brother 3 years later, and then my mother. And as these things were happening, it felt like boulders coming on top of me every single time. It was like, oh my God, there it is again. Boom, and my mother dropped me to my knees, literally and figuratively. I didn't think I'd ever get back up. It damaged me in my heart. And our souls never get damaged. They feel wounds, but it never gets damaged. It's our healing place. And I knew that. So I was able to step into my soul. The soul is the vine to the divine. And it is where it's kind of, take a leaf and look at it. And it's just a leaf. If you hold it up to the light, it has veins in it. And it's its lifeblood. That's our soul. And the veins are the divine. So they are constantly giving us information to heal ourselves. So we can go inward to heal. And it's not our minds that are healing us. Our minds are thinking is distorted when we've had damage. We get distortions. We see it differently. The soul is not distorted. So I knew that. And I knew I had to move into the soul source. And but I didn't know if I could. And I remember rocking myself, literally holding my arms around my body and rocking and saying to the spirit world, I know you love me more than anything. I know you love me more than anything. And I didn't stop saying it until I felt this rush of love come into me and peace. And after that, I was able to actually get up. And it was hours. I was that broken from it. We don't have broken souls. So thank God that they gave us that, because I don't know if we could survive that kind of trauma. But I did, and I thrived, and I help people with it now. So it doesn't mean it doesn't affect me when I talk about it. It doesn't mean that it's just gone. I will grieve the rest of my journey, as we do with everything powerful in grief. We think it's going to go away when we heal. Heal is not go away. Heal is I can survive it and thrive through it, and I can see good in it somehow. So I know when you're in the midst of grief, no, you're not going to say, if I said to you, you're going to find good in this someday, that would be the biggest mistake of my life. I would have punched somebody. What are you talking about? How could you say that to me? That's so cruel. But later on, when you look back, you see something has changed in you. Something has expanded. Something came from it that you don't understand, but it's there. And it could be much later. It could be a short period of time. It depends upon the grief and the dynamic. So, grief is solo. My mother, when she died, my sister grieved completely different than me because we had a different relationship. Not better or worse, just different. And so we had a different form of grief. So I always tell people grief is in the corner doing push-ups, and it's waiting for you to be vulnerable. And the minute you become vulnerable, you can be in the grocery store looking at a can of beans, and boom, there it is. And you start sobbing and you don't even know why. And you have to remind yourself, people come to me and they go, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I said, what do you mean you don't know what's wrong with you? Well, I don't know what's wrong with me. I lost my son. It's been 3 years and I still cry every day. And I go, what's wrong is nothing. What's right is you're grieving. And that's what's happening. So what I want you to say when you say to yourself, what's wrong with me? I want you to say to yourself, oh, that's right. I'm grieving. I've lost my child. I'm not going to stop that grief process. But what happens is it gets further and further apart in coming. So where we used to come every minute of every day, it starts coming every hour of every day, and then every 3 hours of every day, and then every other day, and so on. And before you know it, you're doing life, because that's the power that they've given us. We are empowered to survive. We are. We've been grieving since we were born. It is not new to us. People say to me, I don't understand grief. I've never grieved. And I say, you've never grieved like this. But grief has been there since you were born. Your mom took your bottle away. You grieved. Giving birth, coming out of the womb, you start getting poked and prodded and crying, and you're grieving. It is not foreign to you. And you've been grieving your whole life. And you go through the grief process. If you lose your favorite pencil, it's minimal, but you still grieve it. So grief is not foreign to you, and what you need to, and they've taught us that. They've given us that truth so that we can survive loss of a loved one.
Well, I first want to say I've had the pleasure of meeting several trafficking survivors and working on a project a few years ago. And I think just you sharing your story is courageous. And, we appreciate that, as I'm sure a lot of people working with you appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to ask you before I I guess we are going to change subjects here a little bit, but we're obviously big fans of Raymond Moody. Really enjoyed talking with him. We made that 2 episodes because it was just such a fun interaction. And I know your paths have crossed with him. I'm wondering if you could talk about what led you to this divinity path, and if there was anything that you feel like you kind of gained during that time.
Well, the divinity path was led to me. I didn't go to it, and that happened because of my NDE. I had no choice. I had no option but to help people. It was part of who I was. It's not an extension of me, or outside of me, or I guess it is an extension of me, but it's not outside of me. It's part of me. And I want to help people, and I need to help people, and I feel called to it always. I have trouble saying no to people who are clients that I can't see because I'm so booked, and I'll end up figuring out a way. I just can't not do it. Going into with Raymond Moody, he was on my bucket list. So what happened was I read Life After Life, and it totally resonated with me. Like, I understood these people, and they were my tribe. That's how I felt. These are my tribe. This is amazing. I never felt connected to anyone like that. And I wanted so badly to understand my experiences. And he's not like a Mr. Mediumship guy. Quite honestly, he said, I'm not sure I even believe in mediumship totally, And then we were there, and I read one of his clients that was there out of the blue. I just started reading her, and he was looking at me like, wow, like, what's going on here? So he wasn't, a fan, but that wasn't what I was there for. I was there to understand my NDE and to learn. I took his courses in psychomantiums, and my mother came to me for the first time since she died. And it was unbelievably phenomenal. I became certified in that because I wanted to help people, and I haven't done it. I need to. Don't tell him. If he listens to this, he's going to know. And I want to do it, But I don't know what happened for him and I, but he said something to me that was really profound. He said, I'm not always comfortable around the physical people. And he said, there's something I feel comfortable. So I would sit next to him. I have all these pictures of sitting next to him and his arms around me, and we really bonded. I cannot tell you, there's probably no one on this planet that I respect more. And I have love for him, for what he does, for who he is, for his soul. And, I've talked to him since very briefly, but he doesn't like to talk on the phone. And he doesn't like email. He doesn't like text. He likes you to write him a letter. And I'm not big on writing letters. So unfortunately, we haven't had, the connection. I am going to write him one, though. I keep telling myself, and I am, I have to. But he taught me how to trust my experience fully. He explained to me about the well and what that means. And I told him, well, I didn't look back and see my body. And he said, you were a child. I had I worked with hospice for a while, and I had amazing shared death experiences. And he told me about them, and he told me he was going to write a book on them. And he did. To my knowledge, I haven't read it yet. I try not to read too much because I don't want it to taint me, and it doesn't. I don't know why I'm so worried about it. But with him, I'll read it. With his books, I'll read. And so he explained to me what that was, that I was sharing an experience with people who were crossing over. I don't know what parts of my experience he related to or what, other people had similar, but he did tell me that a lot of what I was sharing metaphorically was very similar to what he would hear from people when he was studying. But he meant metaphorically. So children see it differently because we don't understand. And so when they're very metaphorical with us. And so what someone might say with beautiful, bright colors, I would say it was like a cartoon, So we see it differently and we experience it on a different level so that we can understand some of it. And it imprints on us differently. Because we're going to come back as 4.5. And how are we going to describe it if it's not something we've ever experienced at all in meaning colors and things like that? So I really believe that that's why they do that, the spirit world. And he understood that. He knew what I was saying when I said the yellow brick road. He said, I understand what you saw. And most people don't call it the yellow brick road, but I understand what you saw. That was very empowering for me. Did I answer your question? I think I did.
You definitely did. Yeah, you definitely did. It's sometimes I'm a little bit, there's so much in your responses, which is great. But, I have to kind of pick and choose. I want you to be able to share more than me just asking my personal questions about your experience.
I appreciate that.
Let me ask you about your book. Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, what inspired you to write the book, and what kind of feedback have you gotten so far?
I've gotten tremendous feedback. I am blown away. It's only been out a month, and I've gotten like 160 reviews that most of them are 5 stars. It's just and what's most important is people are writing me. And they're writing even in the reviews that this has been profoundly life-changing for them and their grief. And they understand now where their loved ones are and they feel like they might be able to connect. And I go through everything. That book just carries my soul in it. And I want people to be able to connect without having to spend money going to a medium. I want them to learn about fear versus intuition. I want them to learn about the pure love of spirit and what our soul journeys really are and what they're really about. So it's been very powerful. It's, the byline is wisdom from the spirit world on living, dying, and the in-between. It's not wisdom from Susan Grau on living, dying, and the in-between. And that's important to say because it's not me who put those words on that paper. My experiences, yes, but the profound connection that it has to the human existence and the soul came from the spirit world. So I wasn't an author. Everyone says you are now. And I still go, I'm not a writer, and they go, yes, you are. I'm writing a second book and I'm still saying I'm not a writer. But I was in my kitchen. I was doing a documentary called Beyond the Grave. And I was in the middle of that really. And I was deciding, am I going to follow through with this? Because I wasn't sure. I didn't know the producer, et cetera. And I was in the middle of kind of negotiating and hearing about it. And I heard you need to write it's time. That's what I heard. Honestly, it's time. I knew what they meant. They meant it's time to write the book. And I said, are you crazy? That's what I said out loud. Are you out of your, what? I'm not a writer. That's what I said. And they said, it's time to write your book. And they meaning the spirit world. And I heard it as loud as day. It was out of me. It was outside of me. I heard it, which is unusual for me. I usually hear it in my head. And they said, it's time, and it's time to stop everything else and write your book. So I call my manager and I go, I don't know if I can do the documentary because I follow direction from the spirit world. I don't know if I can do it. And I said, I think I have to stop working. And she said, why? And I said, because I'm supposed to write a book. And she goes, well, you will not stop working. You will not, because I couldn't. I needed, and I ended up doing both. So I was writing a book, doing a documentary, and I was doing my one-on-one with people and doing my grief work. And I was doing it all at once. And so I know the spirit world put those words down because there's no way your mind can take all that in and put that all out on paper. But I did. And I'm really proud of myself because I could have said no, and I didn't. So that's how I ended up ultimately wanting everything that has been grand and beautiful in my life that has helped others has always come from that. I'm just the conduit. And I don't say that just like it's nothing, because I have to be willing, and that's a big deal. I deal with loss and the darkest griefs every day. And so I have to be willing to take that in, and I am. But it's always been where I belong. It's my lifeblood.
I don't want to move on from your book without asking you, for people, because obviously the book is doing well from what I'm hearing. What do you think people could take away from your book? What are the benefits to reading your book?
Oh, there's so many. It's important to learn the difference between fear and intuition. I think we're very fear-based, people are, and we have reason to be, and we have brains, and our brains get distorted in our traumas. And this world is, we learn through traumatic events. We learn quite extensively. Pain and joy are equal in value. And in fact, I think the pain has taught me more, but they both teach us something. And my book has a lot of that understanding. It helps people connect into their soul source. It helps them understand their life path. It gives them exercises to look at their connection to the spirit world and their loved ones who have crossed over. It has integration moments at the end of every chapter and exercises, and they're powerful. And if you do them, you will learn about your soul. It talks about where your loved ones are. I mean, what's the first question? Where are they? You lose someone. Where did they go? Where are they? Are they alive? Are they thriving? What's happening to them? It talks all about that. It talks about the love of the spirit world. It talks about why we go through the experiences we go through. It is so filled with soul knowledge and growth and the big questions. Where am I going? Where are my loved ones? What is my soul journey? How do I understand myself? Why do I go through these experiences? Those are the big questions. And it answers them. And it answers them with what I'm hearing, with the ability for them to truly ingest it. The way that it's presented isn't just foreign language. It's actually brought to them in a way like I do in those rooms where they can actually understand it. And that's powerful.
Well, let's, if we can, talk about your process when you work with someone who's grieving. And the first question we had here, I think you've already seen, is if you're sitting down with someone, you're helping individuals, you're helping families who are struggling. How common is it? I'm going to assume very common, but I'll let you decide that. I don't think a lot of people who work with grieving individuals have had near-death experiences. Is that something that guides these conversations that you have, or is it just kind of in the back of your mind as you help them process?
I think both. Honestly, what a great question. No one's ever asked me that. I think it's both. I know that's what shaped me. I don't know who I would have been without it, so I can't tell you how it shaped me and my thinking and my way of doing things because I was so young, but I know it shaped me. And I have visited the spirit world since. I had a brain tumor, And I had an experience when I was in surgery. And, I visit the spirit world since. I don't share about it, but I have. I don't want people to say, oh, she's nuts. I still have a little of that worry. I have to be honest. I'm human, having a human experience. But I think most of what shapes me is my knowing. I have a knowing inside of what to say next. I think the spirit world gives me that so that I'm able to help them heal in a tangible way instead of just saying the book knowledge, and also all of my experiences come forward, not in transference. I don't transfer my trauma or their trauma onto me or my trauma onto them. I stay very much with them. I hold that space for them. But I know that my life experience, when I say to them, if they say to me, I have a mother who died by suicide, I can say, I don't understand your pain exactly, but I understand the pain of that. And I've healed that. Let me help you. You can heal this. And so I think all the things that I've been through, which I've only named a few, quite honestly, but all the things that I've been through in my life experience has brought me to that place that there isn't a lot you could say to me that I haven't been through. There really isn't. There are a few things that are pretty big that I haven't, and I don't want to. I've had enough, but there isn't a lot I haven't been through. So when you can tap in knowledge that is experience-based, because what are we here for? We're here for the experience. It's an experiential place, right? And, it's kind of like, here's an example of what knowledge can do. You can be in the spirit world. You can learn about the ocean. There's ocean there. There's water there. But let's just say there isn't. You can learn about the ocean. You can study the ocean. You can delve into it, dwell into it so deep that you think you know everything about it. But do you really know it till you put your toes in it, roll in the ocean waves, smell the salt, taste the salt, put your toes in the sand? Do you really know it? No. But once you go through that experience, you can actually say, I had my toes in that sand. I rolled in those waves. I tasted that salt. Man, let me tell you about it. What I felt, what I really experienced. And that's what we're here to do. So this is our experiential place. It's not always fun. You might get in the ocean and it might knock you into the floor of it. It's not always fun, but you've had the experience and it's taught you something. Don't go jumping in the ocean when there's a wave twice your size coming at you. Don't face it head on, right? You're going to turn your back to it. So you're learning things as you're going here. And that's the power of experience.
Now, I know you've touched on this a little bit, and it's obviously too much for me to put into one question. So I've been thinking about how to word this. But if you were speaking with someone, let's say someone listens or watches this episode, and they're going through grief right now. Maybe they've lost a loved one. What is one piece of advice that you would give them just to get started in the grieving process?
Well, I would give them and their loved ones this piece of advice. Don't measure grief. You can't measure grief and you can't measure love. It's impossible. So when we say, I hear people say things like, well, I was closer to my mother, or I was closer to my son. He was my best friend, or she was my best friend. And I say, don't measure grief and don't measure the loss. The worst mistake we make is we judge grief. I should be done grieving. It's been 2 years. I should be done grieving. It's been 3 years. It's been 10 years. I shouldn't be grieving anymore. Let it be what it is. Allow it to come, because this is the beauty of how we've been created. The grief comes in, and then somehow, some way, for a moment, we get relief. Maybe somebody trips and falls in a funny way, and we laugh. Maybe we're watching a cartoon and we start giggling, and we go, oh, I shouldn't be giggling. I shouldn't be laughing. Not true. But we feel that guilt. We think it denies the loss of the loved one or the pain behind it, and it doesn't. But it gives us that moment of remembering what it's like just to be. And and to feel just a flash of joy. And we've been given that gift. So, I want people to know that there is no measurement here and there is no judgment. Do not judge anyone else's grief either. People tell me I lost my dog and everyone's laughing at me because I feel so much pain. Or someone will say to me, I lost a child in utero, and everyone's saying, well, they weren't on the planet. Like, you didn't know them. You shouldn't be grieving so badly. And my advice to everyone is not to measure someone else's grief. You have no business doing that. Your job is to honor their grief, not judge it. And if you can measure it for me, tell me how, because I certainly can't. And I've been dealing with it all my life. So I would say that would be the most important. And again, not to judge themselves. And remembering that grief is in charge. Grief decides when it's going to lighten up on you. You don't get to decide when you're going to lighten up on it. So when you tell yourself, I'm not okay, and I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm back to that again. Grief decides how it's going to handle. And that's a scary thought, isn't it? But it's always been that way, so you don't need to be afraid of that, because it's been that way throughout your life journey. It's been in charge. When it's there, you're not in charge of it. But what you can do is work through it. And there's your empowerment. You can step into it. You can face those demons. And you'll find that they lose their power, so to speak, because we're meant to have that happen. We're meant to allow it to lose some of its power, or we wouldn't survive it. So we have the beauty of our minds and our hearts and our spirit, which is our breath of life, that can help us get through that.
Okay, so yeah, you have a new book that you're working on as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the direction you want to go?
Absolutely. It's called Infinite Healing, and it is wisdom from the spirit world on healing the shadows that bind us. So all those shadow experiences, all those things we're still holding on to. And it's in simplicity, just like my other book, so that you can grow and heal. And it talks a lot about, as it stands right now, it talks a lot about how to move into our soul source, which is our divine vine to the divine, and where the healing lies, instead of trying to figure out what to do next. And it teaches us how to go through that experience. It's very similar to my first book. It's in layman's terms. It's very easy read, but it makes sense. There's a lot of books out there that I was saying I get a lot of flack for, because I say there's no soul wounds. But if our soul was wounded, and my soul was wounded, and your soul was wounded, where would we go to heal? There'd be nowhere. That is the divine vine, and then that is the healing's area for us to go. Our soul feels the wounds, yes. When people say, oh, my soul's in so much pain, yes, it feels it, but it doesn't get wounded by it. It doesn't get damaged and broken by it like our heart does. And people die from broken hearts. And that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful damage and pain. And our breath of life, our spirit, and, that gets damaged. And of course, our thinking gets distorted, but our soul is whole. And it's where you can go to heal. And I'm trying to do a trilogy of infinite, because that means forever. And we are always healing. We are always looking for wisdom. We are always wanting to learn. And so that's my next book. And it also has exercises and integration. It's called Mirror Work, where you learn to do exactly what your soul purpose is, and exactly what that is. At the bottom line, the shadows stop us from self-love. And it is the hardest thing we do here, is to love ourselves fully. And so the book teaches us how to get to that place of true self-love. That's my goal. And to release the shadows that are stopping you because they're in the way. Because your true soul purpose, at the end of the day, your true soul purpose is self-love. And your life purpose is all the other things that bring you and integrate into your soul purpose. So if you do something in life that you don't like, you lack in self-love. So let's clean it up. so that you can look in that mirror and see the reflection looking back and feel love. It's really hard to do. It's hard for me.
I think it's hard for most people, I would say, to look in the mirror and feel that way.
Yeah.
I know that you're really busy, and you do have a lot going on with the books, and I'm sure you're still doing appearances and things like that. If someone watches this, listens to this, wants to learn more, reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
I'm still seeing clients one-on-one. I can't stop. I should be, but I can't. They can go to susangrau.com and they can learn all about me. They can go to Susan Grau Official on all social media. I will tell you, I don't do a lot on Twitter, not because I don't. I think it's called something else now. I just don't have time. But I do put everything on my social media. I'm doing a book signing at the Grove in October 26th. And so, I welcome you down. I'd love to have you there. I do Hay House events and I do other healing events. I do events for grieving mamas, and I'm hoping to start doing events with helping parents heal. I do the Seeking Center. I'm going to be doing events with them. So, I'm all over. I'm getting ready to do a Facebook event with Hay House in a couple weeks. Keep an eye on my Susan Grau Official social media, because I'll be doing readings and I'll be helping people and teaching them what's in that book. So there's a lot out there. And, my goal is to make sure there is, so that people can be reached. My goal is to reach the masses, because seeing people one-on-one, you as healing as it can be, you can only reach so many, because it is exhausting.
Well, we really appreciate you doing this. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Sheol Podcast and hear your thoughts, your insights, your story. I'm excited for people to get to hear this episode. And hopefully we can talk again soon.
I hope so too. I'd love to come back, and thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful. I've just been able to share peacefully and not worry about, what's the next right answer, just to flow. And I love that feeling.